from Buckingham Palace, which has announced that the King has been diagnosed with cancer. Let me bring you that statement from Buckingham Palace in full. During the King's recent hospital procedure for benign prostate enlargement,
King Charles collapsed, and what Queen Camilla did next is unforgivable. You won't believe the shocking video that's breaking the internet right now. Emergency sirens are wailing, crowds are screaming, and the royal family is in complete chaos. Camilla's explosive outburst caught on camera has left everyone speechless. But wait until you see what Prince William did that changed everything. At approximately 7:30 in the morning,
I don't think any solutions in the world can ever be achieved by yourself. And one of my roles has always been to build coalitions, to build relationships, build teams. And this is no different. I'm building an enormous team of brilliant people and letting them crack on and do the work that needs to be done. So I think that's really important to kind of have the dynamism.
Palace staff discovered the king unconscious at his desk. Medical experts who have studied similar cases explain that cancer treatment can sometimes cause unexpected complications, particularly in patients who continue to maintain demanding schedules. The response was immediate and well coordinated. Palace protocol for medical emergencies had been updated following the king's cancer diagnosis, and staff acted quickly. Within minutes, the royal physician was on scene, followed by paramedics from the London Ambulance Service. The decision was made to transport the king to a central London hospital equipped with specialized cardiac and oncology units. News of the emergency began to spread through official channels before 8 o'clock. The first indication that something was wrong came when several high-profile royal engagements were suddenly canceled without explanation. Royal correspondents, who closely monitor such changes, immediately began making inquiries. By 9 o'clock, unconfirmed reports were circulating among media outlets that the king had been taken to hospital. The scene outside Buckingham Palace began to change as word spread. Small groups of people started gathering near the gates, many carrying flowers and handwritten messages. These early arrivals included longtime royal supporters who had followed the monarchy for decades, as well as tourists who happened to be in the area. The atmosphere was tense but respectful, with conversations conducted in hushed tones. Media organizations quickly mobilized their royal coverage teams. Broadcast vans arrived outside the palace, and reporters began setting up positions along the mall. Social media platforms saw a surge in activity as news began to break officially. The hashtag relating to the king's health started trending within the hour, with messages of support pouring in from around the Commonwealth and beyond. The first official statement came at 10:15 from Buckingham Palace press office. The brief announcement confirmed that His Majesty had been admitted to hospital for observation, and that Queen Camilla had been informed immediately. The statement emphasized that the king remained conscious and was receiving excellent care, but provided no details about the specific nature of his condition or what had caused the emergency. This initial communication followed established royal protocol for health matters. Since the king's cancer diagnosis became public, the palace has maintained a policy of providing factual updates while respecting medical privacy. Royal historians note that this approach represents a significant departure from the complete secrecy that surrounded royal health issues in previous generations. The impact of the news was felt immediately across government circles. The Prime Minister was briefed on the situation during the morning cabinet meeting, and arrangements were put in place to ensure continuity of constitutional functions. Under the British system, the monarch's role in government is largely ceremonial, but certain formal procedures require royal approval. Contingency plans that had been developed following the king's cancer diagnosis were now being activated. Prince William, who is heir to the throne, was attending an environmental summit in Scotland when the emergency occurred. According to sources close to the Prince of Wales, he was immediately informed and began making arrangements to return to London. His wife, Catherine, who completed her own cancer treatment in 2024, was reportedly coordinating with palace officials to manage the family's response to the crisis. The reaction from the public was swift and emotional. By midday, hundreds of people had gathered outside the hospital where the king was being treated. Many brought flowers, cards, and small gifts, creating an impromptu shrine of support. The crowd included people of all ages, from elderly royal supporters who remembered the king's mother, Queen Elizabeth, to young families teaching their children about the significance of the moment. International media coverage intensified throughout the morning. News organizations from across the Commonwealth and beyond dispatched correspondents to London to cover the developing story. The king's role as head of state for multiple countries meant that the news had global significance, with government officials from Australia, Canada, and other realms issuing statements of concern and support. Financial markets showed immediate reaction to the news. The pound experienced some volatility during morning trading, and shares in companies with royal warrants saw minor fluctuations. Economic analysts noted that while the immediate market response was limited, prolonged uncertainty about royal succession could have broader implications for British institutions and international relationships. Throughout the morning, medical experts appeared on various news programs to discuss the potential implications of the king's condition. Oncologists emphasize that cancer treatment can sometimes cause unexpected side effects, particularly in patients who maintain active schedules. Cardiologists discuss the additional strain that royal duties can place on individuals dealing with serious health conditions. Palace staff work diligently to manage the flow of information while maintaining normal operations where possible. Tours of Buckingham Palace continued as scheduled, though with additional security measures in place. The changing of the guard ceremony proceeded normally, though with noticeably larger crowds of onlookers hoping for any additional news or updates. Queen Camilla arrived at the hospital shortly after 11 o'clock, accompanied by a small security detail. Her arrival was captured by news cameras positioned outside the medical facility, and her composed but visibly concerned demeanor was noted by royal correspondents. She did not make any public statements upon arrival, following royal protocol for sensitive family matters. The timing of the emergency was particularly significant, given the king's recent public appearances. Just days earlier, he had attended a charity reception for cancer awareness, where he spoke movingly about his own experience with the disease. Medical sources suggested that the stress of maintaining public duties while undergoing treatment may have contributed to the morning's events. As the day progressed, messages of support continued to arrive from world leaders, religious figures, and heads of state from across the globe. The Archbishop of Canterbury issued a statement calling for prayers for the king's recovery, while the chief rabbi and other religious leaders offered similar messages of support. These expressions of concern highlighted the king's role not just as a political figure, but as a symbolic leader for many communities. The situation also prompted discussions about the future of the monarchy and the role of succession planning. Constitutional experts appeared on news programs to explain the procedures that would be followed if the king's condition were to worsen. While emphasizing that such scenarios were not immediately relevant, they helped to educate the public about the institutional safeguards that exist to ensure governmental continuity. By early afternoon, a second palace statement indicated that the king's condition had stabilized and that he was resting comfortably. However, the announcement also noted that he would remain under medical observation for at least 24 hours, suggesting that his condition was being taken seriously by his medical team. This update provided some reassurance to the public while maintaining appropriate medical caution. The crisis had effectively brought normal royal activities to a halt. Scheduled engagements for other members of the royal family were being reviewed and, where necessary, postponed or reassigned. The careful choreography that normally governs royal duties was being replaced by the urgent need to respond to an unfolding medical emergency while maintaining institutional dignity and public confidence. The events of that October morning did not occur in isolation. To understand the full scope of what happened, it is necessary to examine the weeks and months leading up to the king's medical emergency. Palace insiders, speaking on condition of anonymity, have revealed that there had been growing concerns about the monarch's health and his determination to maintain a full schedule despite his ongoing cancer treatment. King Charles had been receiving regular cancer treatment since his diagnosis in February 2024, following what was initially described as a routine procedure for benign prostate enlargement. Medical experts familiar with cancer treatment protocols explain that the physical and emotional toll of such therapy can be significant, particularly for patients over 70. The king, however, had been resistant to reducing his workload, viewing his royal duties as essential to maintaining stability during a challenging period for the monarchy. In the weeks preceding the emergency, palace staff had noticed subtle changes in the king's behavior and appearance. Those who worked closely with the monarch reported that he appeared more tired than usual during private meetings and was occasionally short of breath during longer engagements. These observations were shared discreetly among senior staff, but attempts to suggest modifications to his schedule were consistently rebuffed by the king himself. The relationship between King Charles and Queen Camilla had become increasingly strained over the question of his health management. Sources close to the royal household indicate that Camilla had been pressing her husband to reduce his commitments and focus more attention on his recovery. These discussions, which took place away from public view, reportedly became more heated as the king's condition showed signs of affecting his daily routine. Medical professionals who have worked with cancer patients in similar situations explain that it is common for individuals to resist acknowledging the limitations imposed by their treatment. The psychological impact of accepting reduced capacity can be particularly challenging for people in positions of significant responsibility. For someone in the king's position, where duty and service are central to identity, such acceptance becomes even more difficult. Palace physicians had been monitoring the king's condition closely, conducting regular assessments and adjusting his treatment protocol as needed. However, royal medical care operates within unique constraints. The monarch's schedule is planned months in advance, and canceling or postponing engagements can have significant diplomatic and constitutional implications. This creates pressure to maintain appearances, even when medical advice might suggest otherwise. The night before the emergency, several palace staff members later recalled observing concerning signs. The king had worked unusually late in his private study, reviewing documents and correspondence that had accumulated during his recent medical appointments. His private secretary had attempted to suggest that some of the work could be deferred, but the king insisted on completing the tasks himself, stating that he would not allow his condition to compromise his duties to the nation. Queen Camilla had retired for the evening before her husband finished his work. According to staff members, she had expressed frustration earlier that day about his refusal to delegate more responsibilities to other members of the royal family. Prince William and Catherine had both offered to take on additional engagements, but the king remained determined to fulfill his own commitments wherever possible. The physical demands of royal duties, even those conducted privately, can be considerable. Reading and responding to official correspondence, meeting with government officials, and maintaining awareness of current affairs all require sustained mental energy. For someone undergoing cancer treatment, these seemingly routine activities can become increasingly challenging, though the king had been reluctant to acknowledge this reality. Palace security staff, who maintain a constant but discreet presence, had noted that the king's routines had become somewhat irregular in recent weeks. His usual walking schedule in the palace gardens had been reduced, and he had begun using elevators more frequently instead of taking the stairs. These small changes, while individually insignificant, collectively suggested that his physical condition was more compromised than he was willing to admit publicly. The royal household's medical team had been operating under increasingly difficult circumstances. Balancing the king's desire to maintain normal activities with the requirements of his cancer treatment required careful coordination and frequent adjustments to schedules. The team included specialists in oncology, cardiology, and general medicine, all working together to provide comprehensive care while respecting the unique demands of royal life. Intelligence gathered from various palace sources suggests that there had been at least 2 previous instances in the weeks leading up to the emergency, when the king had experienced concerning symptoms. On both occasions, he had dismissed staff concerns and refused suggestions that he should seek immediate medical attention. His determination to avoid any appearance of weakness or incapacity had apparently overridden medical caution. The broader context of the monarchy's recent challenges also played a role in the king's mindset during this period. Following his cancer diagnosis and Catherine's own health issues in 2024, there had been increased public scrutiny of the royal family's ability to carry out their duties effectively. The king was acutely aware that any further signs of vulnerability could undermine public confidence in the institution he had waited decades to lead. Staff members who interacted with the king during his private moments reported that he frequently expressed concern about the legacy he would leave and the state of the monarchy he would pass on to his son. These conversations revealed the psychological pressure he felt to demonstrate strength and continuity, even at the cost of his own well-being. The weight of centuries of royal tradition and expectation had created an environment where admitting weakness felt like failing in his fundamental duty. The king's approach to his illness had been shaped by his understanding of royal history and precedent. He was aware that previous monarchs had faced significant health challenges while continuing to reign, and he appeared determined to follow their example. However, modern expectations of transparency and the changed nature of royal duties in the 21st century created new pressures that his predecessors had not faced. Palace communications staff had been working carefully to manage public perceptions of the king's health while respecting his privacy and dignity. The balance between providing reassurance and maintaining honesty had become increasingly difficult as his condition required more intensive management. Regular bulletins about his progress had been carefully crafted to convey optimism while acknowledging the reality of his ongoing treatment. The evening before the emergency, the king had participated in a video call with Commonwealth leaders, discussing upcoming diplomatic initiatives and trade relationships. Participants in that call later noted that while he appeared engaged and mentally sharp, he also seemed visibly fatigued. The demands of such high-level discussions, even conducted remotely, required considerable energy and focus. Kitchen staff at the palace had observed that the king's appetite had decreased noticeably in recent weeks, a common side effect of cancer treatment that can lead to decreased energy and compromised immune function. Despite the efforts of royal chefs to prepare nutritious and appealing meals, his food consumption had become irregular, adding to concerns about his overall physical condition. The king's personal protection officers, who maintained close proximity to the royal family at all times, had been briefed on potential medical scenarios and emergency procedures. However, the nature of their role requires them to balance security concerns with respect for royal privacy, creating complex dynamics when health issues arise. Their observations and concerns had been communicated through appropriate channels, but ultimate decisions about medical care remained with the king and his physicians. Throughout this period, Prince William had been gradually taking on additional responsibilities, though this transition had been managed carefully to avoid suggesting that his father was unable to fulfill his duties. The delicate process of preparing for eventual succession, while respecting the current monarch's authority, had created additional stress within the royal household, as staff navigated competing loyalties and expectations. The cumulative effect of these various factors had created a situation where the king's determination to maintain normal activities was increasingly at odds with his physical capacity to do so safely. The morning of October 15th represented the culmination of weeks of mounting pressure, insufficient rest, and the ongoing toll of cancer treatment on a monarch who refused to acknowledge his own limitations. As the king remained under medical observation, the palace worked to maintain a carefully controlled narrative about his condition and the family's response to the crisis. However, events would soon spiral beyond their ability to manage, beginning with an incident that would fundamentally alter public perception of the royal family and threaten the monarchy's carefully maintained image of unity and stability. The first sign of trouble emerged on the afternoon of October 16th, less than 24 hours after the king's hospitalization. A video recording, captured on a mobile phone by a hospital worker, began circulating on social media platforms. The The footage, though grainy and taken from a distance, appeared to show Queen Camilla in a heated conversation with palace officials in a corridor of the medical facility where the king was being treated. The video quality made it impossible to hear the conversation clearly, but lip-reading experts who later analyzed the footage suggested that strong language was being used. More damaging were the visible gestures and body language displayed by the queen consort, which appeared to show frustration and anger directed at those around her. Within hours, the video had been shared thousands of times across various social media platforms, accompanied by speculation about what might have prompted such a reaction. The initial palace response was swift but inadequate. A brief statement was issued denying that any inappropriate behavior had occurred and suggesting that the video showed nothing more than normal family stress during a difficult time. However, this explanation failed to satisfy public curiosity, and the video continued to spread rapidly across the internet, reaching an estimated several million viewers within the first day of its release. The timing of the video's emergence could not have been worse for the royal family. Public sympathy, which had initially been focused entirely on the king's health, began to shift as questions arose about the behavior and attitudes of other family members during the crisis. Royal commentators noted that the monarchy's reputation depends heavily on maintaining an image of dignity and composure, particularly during challenging periods. Professional media organizations initially approached the story with caution, recognizing the sensitive nature of filming inside a medical facility and the privacy concerns involved. However, as the video gained traction on social media and public interest intensified, mainstream news outlets began to cover the story, though most chose to describe the content rather than broadcast the footage directly. The hospital administration launched an immediate investigation into how the recording had been made and distributed. Security protocols at medical facilities treating high-profile patients are typically stringent, and the breach represented a significant failure of protective measures. The staff member responsible for the recording was quickly identified and suspended pending a full inquiry, but the damage had already been done. Analysis of the video by media experts revealed several concerning elements beyond the apparent confrontation itself. The setting appeared to be a private area of the hospital, typically reserved for family members, suggesting that the queen consort had sought privacy for what she believed would be a confidential conversation. The presence of multiple palace officials indicated that the discussion involved matters of institutional importance rather than purely personal concerns. Public reaction to the video was swift and largely negative. Social media platforms saw an immediate surge in criticism of Queen Camilla, with many users expressing disappointment that she would display such behavior during her husband's medical crisis. Hashtags calling for her to step back from royal duties began trending, and online petitions demanding a formal explanation gathered thousands of signatures within hours. The controversy was particularly damaging because it contradicted the carefully cultivated image of Queen Camilla as a supportive and stabilizing presence within the royal family. Since becoming queen consort, she had worked to overcome historical public skepticism about her role and had generally succeeded in gaining acceptance from the British public. The video threatened to undo years of careful reputation management. Royal historians and constitutional experts began appearing on news programs to discuss the potential implications of the controversy. Some argued that the incident represented a private family matter that should not be subject to public scrutiny, while others suggested that members of the royal family must maintain appropriate standards of behavior at all times, given their public roles and the expectations placed upon them. The palace found itself in an increasingly difficult position as demands for clarification intensified. The traditional royal strategy of maintaining dignified silence in the face of controversy was proving inadequate in the age of social media and instant global communication. The institution that had successfully managed its image for centuries was struggling to adapt to the speed and intensity of modern media cycles. Behind the scenes, urgent discussions were taking place about how to respond to the growing crisis. Communications advisors were divided between those who favored a comprehensive public explanation and others who believed that detailed responses would only fuel further speculation. The decision-making process was complicated by the king's continued hospitalization and his limited ability to participate in strategic discussions about the family's response. International media coverage began to intensify as news organizations around the world picked up the story. Commonwealth countries, where the king serves as head of state, saw particular interest in the developments, with local media outlets providing extensive coverage of both the health crisis and the emerging scandal. The global nature of the monarchy's role meant that the controversy had implications far beyond Britain's borders. Prince William faced increasing pressure to make a public statement addressing the situation. As heir to the throne and the most senior royal family member currently able to fulfill public duties, expectations were high that he would provide leadership during the crisis. However, his position was complicated by the need to balance loyalty to his stepmother with his responsibilities to the institution of the monarchy. Legal experts began discussing the potential implications of the unauthorized recording, including privacy laws and the rights of public figures in medical settings. The incident raised broader questions about the security of high-profile individuals in hospitals and the adequacy of existing protocols for protecting their privacy. Medical ethics specialists also weighed in on the appropriateness of staff members recording patients and their families without consent. The controversy deepened when additional details emerged about the circumstances surrounding the video. Sources within the hospital suggested that the confrontation had been preceded by discussions about media management and public communications regarding the king's condition. This context implied that the Queen Consort's frustration might have been related to disagreements about how information should be shared with the public. Public opinion polling conducted in the days following the video's release showed a marked decline in approval ratings for Queen Camilla, with particular criticism from younger demographics who had previously been among her strongest supporters. The monarchy as an institution also saw decreased approval ratings, suggesting that the controversy was affecting broader public confidence in the royal family. The incident highlighted the challenges facing modern royalty in maintaining privacy while fulfilling public responsibilities. Unlike previous generations of royals, who could rely on media deference and limited technology to protect their private moments, contemporary members of the royal family must navigate an environment where every public appearance is potentially recorded and instantly shareable across global networks. As the controversy continued to develop, it became clear that the palace's traditional crisis management strategies were insufficient for the current media environment. The institution that had survived wars, scandals, and constitutional crises was facing new challenges that required different approaches and more rapid responses than had previously been necessary. The video controversy represented more than just a single embarrassing incident. It symbolized deeper tensions within the royal family and raised fundamental questions about privacy, public accountability, and the expectations placed on those who serve in constitutional roles. The monarchy's ability to weather this storm would depend on how effectively it could adapt its communication strategies to address public concerns while maintaining institutional dignity. The turning point in the royal crisis came not from palace communications or official statements, but from an unexpected source that would ultimately help restore public confidence in the monarchy. On the morning of October 18th, as controversy continued to swirl around Queen Camilla's hospital confrontation, Catherine, Princess of Wales, made a decision that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of the entire crisis. Without fanfare or advance notice to the media, Catherine arrived at the hospital where King Charles was recovering. Her approach was deliberately understated, traveling in a modest vehicle with minimal security presence and dressed in simple, respectful attire. This contrasted sharply with the formal protocols typically associated with senior royal visits, sending an immediate signal that this was a personal rather than official engagement. Hospital staff and patients who witnessed Catherine's arrival later described her demeanor as calm and purposeful. Unlike the tension that had characterized previous family visits during the crisis, her presence seemed to bring a sense of peace to the medical facility. She moved through the corridors with quiet dignity, acknowledging staff members with gentle nods and brief words of gratitude for their care of the king. The princess spent nearly 2 hours at the king's bedside, a visit that sources described as deeply emotional and healing for both participants. Medical staff reported that the king's vital signs showed noticeable improvement during and after Catherine's presence, suggesting that the psychological benefits of family support were having measurable physical effects on his recovery process. When Catherine emerged from the hospital, she was approached by waiting media representatives. In a departure from standard royal protocol, she chose to make brief, spontaneous remarks rather than issuing a prepared statement through palace communications. Her words were simple but powerful, expressing gratitude for the medical team's care and asking for continued prayers and support for the king's recovery. The authenticity of Catherine's response resonated immediately with the public. Social media platforms that had been dominated by criticism and controversy suddenly saw an outpouring of positive sentiment. Videos of her hospital visit were shared widely, with many commentators noting the contrast between her composed, caring approach and the tensions that had characterized other family members' responses to the crisis. News organizations quickly recognized the significance of Catherine's intervention. Royal correspondents, who had been covering the scandal-dominated narrative, found themselves shifting focus to this more positive development. Her hospital visit was analyzed not just as a family gesture, but as a masterclass in crisis management and public relations, demonstrating how authentic emotion and genuine care could overcome manufactured controversy. The impact of Catherine's actions extended beyond immediate public relations benefits. Within the royal household, her decisive leadership during the crisis began to reshape internal dynamics and decision-making processes. Staff members who had been struggling to manage conflicting pressures and competing demands found new clarity in her approach, which prioritized family unity and genuine public service over image management. Prince William, who had been under intense pressure to respond to the various crises facing his family, found crucial support in his wife's actions. Together, they began to represent a new model of royal leadership that combined traditional dignity with modern accessibility and emotional intelligence. Their partnership during this challenging period demonstrated the strength that would be available to the monarchy in future years. Behind the scenes, Catherine began taking on additional responsibilities as the king's recovery continued. Her experience as a cancer survivor, having completed her own treatment earlier in 2024, provided unique insight into the challenges facing the monarch and his family. She used this experience to bridge communication gaps and help family members better understand the medical and emotional aspects of the king's condition. The princess's approach to public engagements during this period was carefully calibrated to provide reassurance without overshadowing the king's recovery. She maintained existing commitments while taking on additional duties, demonstrating that the monarchy's work could continue effectively, even during periods of uncertainty. Her presence at charitable events and official functions provided stability that the public had been seeking since the crisis began. Medical experts who observed the family dynamics during the king's recovery noted the positive impact of Catherine's involvement. Oncology specialists explained that family support and reduced stress levels can significantly impact cancer treatment outcomes, and the calming influence she brought to the situation appeared to be beneficial for the king's overall well-being and recovery process. The contrast between Catherine's handling of the crisis and earlier missteps became increasingly apparent to royal watchers and the general public. Her ability to balance personal authenticity with institutional responsibility provided a template for how the monarchy might evolve to meet contemporary expectations while maintaining its essential character and dignity. International coverage of the royal crisis also began to shift as Catherine's role became more prominent. Commonwealth countries and other nations, where the king serves as head of state, expressed renewed confidence in the monarchy's stability and future. Diplomatic relationships that had been strained by uncertainty began to stabilize as evidence mounted that the institution remained strong despite temporary challenges. The king's gradual return to limited duties was carefully managed, with Catherine playing a central coordination role. Her medical experience and understanding of recovery processes helped ensure that his rehabilitation was properly paced and sustainable. This careful management prevented the kind of setbacks that might have occurred if traditional royal approaches to duty had been maintained, regardless of health considerations. As weeks passed, Queen Camilla began a careful process of rebuilding her public image with Catherine's guidance and support. Rather than attempting to defend or explain the controversial hospital incident, she focused on demonstrating through actions her commitment to supporting both the king's recovery and the monarchy's broader mission. This approach, while slow, proved more effective than defensive public statements might have been. The crisis had revealed both vulnerabilities and strengths within the royal family and the institution they represent, while exposing the pressures and personality conflicts that exist behind palace walls. It also demonstrated the monarchy's capacity for renewal and adaptation. Catherine's leadership during this period provided evidence that the institution could evolve while maintaining its core values and public service mission. Public opinion polling conducted months after the crisis showed significant recovery in approval ratings for the monarchy as a whole. While individual family members faced varying levels of ongoing scrutiny, the institution itself had emerged with renewed respect for its ability to navigate challenges and maintain continuity during difficult periods. The long-term impact of the crisis extended beyond immediate public relations concerns to fundamental questions about royal succession and preparation for future leadership. Catherine's performance during the emergency had demonstrated readiness for increased responsibility and provided the public with confidence in the monarchy's future direction and leadership capabilities. Constitutional experts noted that the crisis had inadvertently provided valuable experience in managing the kinds of challenges that might arise during an actual succession process. The systems and procedures developed during the king's recovery could serve as precedents for future situations, making the monarchy more resilient and better prepared for inevitable transitions. The king's eventual return to full royal duties was marked by renewed energy and a more sustainable approach to his responsibilities. The experience of serious illness and family crisis had provided perspective on the balance between duty and personal well-being, lessons that would inform his approach to monarchy for the remainder of his reign. Looking back on the crisis months later, royal historians would identify it as a pivotal moment in the modern monarchy's development. The challenges faced and overcome during this period had strengthened both individual family members and the institution as a whole, providing a foundation for stability and continued public service in the years ahead.